Hi, welcome to week 5. So I'll do a quick video on Screencastify and introduce you to the topics this week, and then I'm going to open 3 threads for you to discuss during the week. So the topic this week is international policy making, and particularly the exporting of this. Sorry, something scanning on my computer, as would happen. And the exporting of those policies, and then the further question of whether they're exporting of policies, again, as we've been asking ourselves, for philanthropic global citizenship purposes, or is it just for profit? So digging in a little as to the intentions of that trend which we see around the world. So the objectives for this week: explore the growth of international policymaking in education, examine the pros and cons of international policymaking in education, and then explore the impact of neoliberalism, this notion of mercantile globalization on the development of international policymaking in education. So the first facet of international policymaking. So what do we mean by international policymaking? Well, it's any attempt to try and create benchmarks or standards that go beyond national borders, right? That's how we would define international policymaking. Some of it is very global, very wide scale. Some of it is not international, but just a matter of agreement between different countries or different schools that then align with different sort of benchmarking. But all of those would found under this general trend that we see of international policymaking in education. So the first one is PISA. I'm not going to spend too long because we've started discussing PISA when we looked at the planned assessment of global competency within PISA from 1918 onwards. So everything takes a little while, but we're going to see some papers come up about that. But PISA has been around for a while. Before that, it's only just started looking at global competency itself, but has been looking at maths and language for a number of years in comparative ways. So we talked a little bit about it, but now it's time to go into it a little bit more detail. We're not yet looking at the nature of the assessment. We're really looking at this stage at the intentions, the framework itself, the countries that are participating, the scope of the project. So you've got a good website there from the OECD, and then you've got a 12-minute video I'll let you watch. It's just going to deepen your understanding of PISA, its creation, its aims, the way it functions, the way countries buy into it and align themselves with it, and what they try and draw out of it in terms of comparative data. But PISA is not the only organization, and there's a lot more of these sort of frameworks arising around the world. PISA really addresses nation states directly, but you have a lot of international policy-making bodies that are non-profits and that are not necessarily appealing to the whole of the country, but appealing to certain schools within the country. So the first example, obviously, is the IB, International Baccalaureate. So I'm going to let you explore that. You've got a website from the IB organization. You've got a couple of another website, Relocate Magazine, that summarizes what International Baccalaureate is about, and you have a video as well that explains to you what it is for those of you who are not familiar. Obviously, a lot of you will be familiar because IB isn't just about the global stuff. It's something that schools adhere to in the global north as well. So you can see how it really is, has ambitions of being international and global and available throughout and creating these links. The next one, people often are very aware of IB in Canada, but there's other frameworks. So you also have the Cambridge International Examinations, which is nothing to, well, it's based in Cambridge, but it hasn't necessarily got to do with the university more than in terms of general geographical affiliation. What it is, it's an examination body. So it's a bit like the IB. Schools can, instead of choosing to follow the IB curriculum, decide to follow the Cambridge International Examination. So I'll let you explore that again with the YouTube video and the website. Same ambitions, same sort of framework, same ideas, that it provides training for teachers, provides the benchmarks, provides the curriculum support. So it's a sort of whole thing that you buy into, and that becomes a way of adhering to international policy that is shared amongst nations, amongst schools. And then you have others too. You have COBIS, who used to be called COBISEC. It's the Council of British International Schools. So not so much concern about details with curriculum, and often they will let schools decide if they're members of Cambridge International or they choose another curriculum. But it's about standardization of policies, international policymaking, more looking at how management of schools and leadership as opposed to the curriculum content. So I'll let you explore all that too. So when you look at that page, an observation that you should be making now critically as master students is that the IB is framed, if you didn't know, on the French baccalaureate, because the baccalaureate in French isn't an undergrad course, it's the end of secondary education. It's a sort of an exam that you take in about 6 or 7 courses, and that marks you end of secondary, and that gives you an end of secondary certificate. It was invented by Napoleon during the Napoleon era, so it's one of the leftovers from the Napoleonic era, centralized, has been offered around the world by French schools. So I went to French schools in London. I was schooled at a French lycée in London. So France has a number of lycées, a number of high schools around the world where it offers the French baccalaureate. So that's what created this first inspiration for the IB, this notion that first of all you had this quite intense curriculum. The French curriculum is very intense, where a lot of subjects are kept to the very last year of school, and that you had to be able to demonstrate competencies in this very, wide scope of subjects all the way till the end of grade 12. Again, very much based on humanist tradition, the idea that you don't specialize, you don't drop things, you keep all of your subjects as far as you can go, and you demonstrate a well-rounded profile in all of these subjects. So that's very much the inspiration for the IB. It comes from this from the French baccalaureate system. Cambridge International Examinations obviously is based on the English curriculum. And Kirby is there, the connotation of link to England is even stronger. So even there, you'd have to stop. And when we talk about post-colonialism, right, we talk about international policy making, but where is that policy made? Where does it originate from? It's still Eurocentric. More than Eurocentric, it's still based on the leftover ambitions of two imperial powers that have moved now and realized that, dominance around the world isn't done necessarily in terms of military might and in terms of occupying territories. It's done in terms of, as we explained before, maintaining very, very strong links economically with global South countries and a prominence as main trading partner. And that's done through education, that's done through the format of your curriculum, it's done through the language of instruction. So that's the stake, that's a new game internationally and with post-colonialism. It's actually about imposing yourself through the international policymaking. So we have to be a little critical here because we're seeing these 3 organizations that are there to in a sort of philanthropic way, create policy, export it around the world on the pretense or at least on the image that they are standardizing policy, enabling the whole world to access the same sort of benchmarks in education. But what they're really doing as well is, again, centralizing the attention onto 2 European countries and a very Eurocentric way of doing education. So I hope that we'll all start turning your head and you start being a little critical of some of what we're seeing. So the first question I'm going to have for you is, are there other attempts at international policy that you are aware of or have encountered? Because these are 3 examples. There are others, there are that I can think of. There are certainly large multinational conglomerates of schools that have attempted international policy across their establishments. In Latin America, there's quite a few that come to mind. There's some around the world as well. I think of especially of Russia or certainly the Eastern Bloc. So I'll let you come up with your examples. You may have encountered some, and I have colleagues in China as well. I know there's very large stakeholders in terms of international education in China, so there may be examples coming from there too to enrich this discussion. Michelle, I count on you to talk about it in terms of higher education, which I haven't mentioned yet, but we should think about that too, and the efforts that are made in terms of international policy making in higher ed and colleges, if you can think of examples. So that will be your first task for this week. Remaining critical of what we're exploring, discovering. It's not descriptive. You're not doing an undergrad course. You're doing a master's course. So you're talking to me about the details you're finding, and you're putting your critical lens on and starting to unpack this and seeing what might be wrong, what might be good, but what might be wrong as well with what we're noticing in its efforts at international policy making. The other question, what are some of the benefits you envision in its sort of framework? So before we get critical, I'm asking what are the benefits. We'll do this in 2 steps. So we go for it. There are some benefits, and there's definitely things that this is sort of contributing to an effort for global education and global citizenship, as we've seen within the framework that we've looked at so far. So what are these benefits? But then we're going to get critical. So, I'm triggering your sort of your reflection on with a few articles. So one from the Financial Times, one from the UK government, and I'll ask you to read those and read them with an open mind, because they're meant to be non-critical. They're actually meant to be fairly positive pieces, but you will see that they really adhere and embrace a vocabulary that's about business and about marketing, to do with international education and policy making. So that's the question I'm going to then ask of you. Is I'm going to move my camera because you can't see the text. Okay. What might be some of the issues and concerns when it comes to the perspective of global South countries? So I'm asking to switch hats, and in this third question and this end of the PowerPoint, to think at everything you've looked at in terms of international policy making and these organizations that are attempting this. You've looked at benefits, but now what might be a concern if you were a teacher or a school leader or an administrator or politician in global South countries? What would you be worried about in terms of this international policy making and exporting of this policy? And then I'm asking you to read the piece on global education post-colonialism, and then to also identify some arguments that would allow global South voices to interpret global education as neoliberal imperialism. So they give you some arguments there as to why we should be critical of this, especially when we adhere to or adopt a global South perspective. And I want you to just identify these arguments. If you have time, I have also posted on Moodle, there's another document. Let me just switch slide. The Verger, which is a very big picture, very conceptual, high-level sort of academic reflection. It's not compulsory reading if you have time. It's a nice piece of academic writing that deals and with the topics that have been brought up this week, but it's not compulsory. It would be the cherry on a sundae. And then you've got some references here. These are not open access. You'd have to look at them through the library apart from the Verger, and they are listed in your top Moodle section on readings as well. So I wish you a good week. I wish you all the best with your assignment 2. It's not due till the end of the week. I'm very flexible with deadlines. Don't go beyond Sunday, because now the pace accelerates and you will have a little essay to do on global competencies next week. So it's important that you do finish this week so that we can embark afresh next week with instructions on the next assignment. So I wish you all the best and have a good week. Speak to you soon.